Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session on the BESA Pipework selection app. It's great that you can all be with us this afternoon. For those of you that were at the BESA conference 2 years ago, you'll remember the original sort of introduction and launch of this project. And we're here today to give you an update on where we are 2 years later down the line. It's very much been a industry collaboration, this project, as you'll see as we go through the presentation we've got for you today. But first of all, I'd just like to introduce you to the esteemed panel that I've got joining me today. So first of all, I've got Chris Owen, who is Manager of Customer Technical Services at Tata Steel. Chris, hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Hello, everybody.
I'm also joined with Douglas Lockyer, who is Principal Engineer Technical Control from Hawley Consulting Engineers. Hello to you, Douglas.
Hello.
And also Irek Starzik, who is Technical Manager at Laing O'Rourke. Hi, Irek.
Hello, everyone.
And finally, we're joined by Matthew Clements, who has assisted us with the development of the app that you will see today, and he works for AP16. So, hi, Matthew. Hope you're okay.
Hello.
So, I think without further ado, what we are planning to do in this session today is, first of all, just run through a presentation which will give you a flavour of the background to this project and also explain why we've done it and where we are, and then we'll give you a demonstration of it as well. So, the BESA Pipework Plus app, better guidance for the building services industry. If I can click to the next screen. Now, can I get to the next slide, please? Okay. Can somebody come click to the next slide? It's not working on my machine.
It's not progressing here either.
No, it's not working on mine either.
Well, here we go. We're on to the next slide. Well, we thought we were anyway. Oops. I think we've gone right to the end. Okay, see if I've got control now. Right, I've got control. I did have control. Been taken away again. Okay, so the BESA Pipework Plus app. This, as I've mentioned, is very much a collaboration, and it's been something that we've been working on for the last 2 years. And that is a collaboration between BESA's Pipework Working Group, which comprises consultants. So we've had a lot of input from Hawley. We've also got contractors, so Laing O'Rourke, NG Bailey, Toby Douglas, and other contractors, but also working in collaboration with the BMTFA, the British Metal Tubes and Fittings Association, and they represent a whole range of manufacturers in the metal pipework, tubes and fittings sector. This guidance is developed for everybody involved in pipework. So that will be designers, consulting engineers, those that are specifying the product, so contractors potentially, but also manufacturers and distributors. And it's essentially for everybody in the sector. What does it provide? Well, it provides detailed tube and fittings technical data and guidance for increased product awareness and, crucially, informed decision making. The benefits are that it will ensure that the industry are referring to the latest tube and fittings technical standards and product guidance. Now, the reason that's so important is because one of the biggest problems that we've experienced, particularly in recent years, is around legacy specifications being used. You often hear the term cut and paste specifications from project to project. And sometimes what can happen is unwittingly you can end up with specifications that may have incorrect or misleading product data relating to pipework. So this is all about trying to sort of eliminate all that kind of stuff. It's kind of linked into, whilst this isn't actually a sort of directly a safety issue, it is very much linked in with the whole post-Grenfell era in relation to the importance of ensuring that product specifications are right and that they're fit for purpose. So as I mentioned, this app is very much a collaboration between BESA and the BMTFA, and it's been a really good exercise, and we see more of this kind of thing. The industry having to work more closely together on this kind of project in the future. So very much about collaboration. As you can see on the screen, we've had a whole range of industry and product experts involved in this project. On the pipework working group, I've mentioned some of these companies previously. On the right-hand side, a whole range of companies from tube and fittings manufacturers who represent the BMTFA technical committee. So I won't read them all out. You can see them there on the screen. But they've also been key to ensuring that this project is where it is today. At that point, I will hand over to Irek, who will take you forward. Irek, thank you.
Thank you, Will. Pipework selection, the basics, basically. Pipework selection is a bit more complicated than engineers think, because it's not just about copying and making references to old, superseded standards or project specifications. Pipework selection is about understanding what the application is, what is the temperature and pressure range, and what is the size range, because all of this influence what pipework standard material we should be using, basically. Unfortunately, many distributors, consultants, or project teams will still wrongly define carbon steel tubes by stating long time ago superseded standard BS 1387, or only referring to EN 10255, which doesn't define exactly carbon steel pipework manufacturing process and technical properties. Or when defining the stainless steel tubes, we seem to see only reference to a grade, for example, 304 or 316, which is simply not enough. When we are talking about metal pipework, there are many things to consider during the selection, basically, and many of them tend to, first of all, there are three main types of tubes, which is carbon, copper, and stainless, and sometimes we are using combination of those, and we know that hybrid systems could cause some additional challenges when we talk about selection. Second of all, engineers don't make references to correct wall thicknesses, whether it's medium, heavy grade schedule, or thin wall stainless steel. And engineers don't understand very often that there are the different joining technologies out there that influencing what type and thickness of tube we will be using. Very often engineers are not referring to manufacturing process of tubes, whether tube is welded, hot finish, welded cold form, or seamless. And this can significantly influence performance and compliance. For example, EN 10255 cold form part 1 tube can be used for room temperature specifications only and is not suitable for most MEP applications. Therefore, if we don't stay exactly, standard and description and manufacturing process that we want, it's very likely sometimes, very often we are gonna get instead something cheaper, which comes from unknown source and is not necessarily compliant with our specifications. Joining technologies, we tend to also forget that the tube is also a part of the system, and system is only as strong as its weakest link. Normally, it will be a joining which needs to be taken into consideration during overall project pipework system design. Type of joining system will dictate what type of tube product we will be using. So, as we know, there are many joining systems on the market. And this will add another level of complexity to our pipework design. We should also remember that a general tube pressure rating is significantly higher in comparison with the pipework system pressure rating, which includes components such fittings, gaskets, and valves. Every system that you can see on this slide, braced, solder, compression, welded, flanges, has its strengths and weaknesses, which needs to be really seriously considered when we are designing and building a pipework system. Are there any other considerations? Of course, there are many, and some of them listed on this slide are environment. So is the pipework system located internally or externally? Buried in the ground? What is the corrosion category required? So for example, if the project is in Ipswich, let's say, we need to consider category C5. If in Brighton, very likely it will be C3. So in both situations, we need to make sure that we know about this and the tube and fitting will have the adequate protection to comply with these requirements. Supports and fittings, different tubes basically and different joining methods will have different support and fixing requirements, which we need to really consider. And very often they are very specific and provided and advised by the joining system manufacturer, which obviously we need to follow. Understanding installation skills available. So again, engineers might select welded fittings, which usually give you the best pressure integrity. But from the other hand, they might introduce hot work permits on site, basically, which not necessarily always is preferable. And as we know, basically in the industry, we've got a shortage of coded welders, so this could be the challenge as well. Thermal expansion, basically very important point to consider. We need to remember that coefficient of the expansion is different for different kind of materials as well. Having safety issue, basically very important to consider. If we go for thicker, heavier tubes, we need to think about the planning, handling, lifting, transporting, and basically positioning the spools or modules with this type of pipe systems. Protection, the next important point to consider, different types of metal tubes will have different requirements for protection and corrosion protection, especially under installation, where carbon steel tubes usually will be painted with 2 layers of epoxy coating painting, and for example, stainless steel will be protected with foil wrapping. So different methods of protection for different pipe system. Another point is the pre-commissioning and water treatment. Again, selection of water treatment chemicals will depend on the type of pipework material we use, and this really serious points that we should consider during selection of our pipe system. And finally, compatibility with other metals in the systems. As we mentioned previously, we've got the hybrid systems, and what we need to watch is the galvanic corrosion scale, and again, type of chemicals we are gonna use with water treatment. So really, there are so many points that should be taken into consideration to understand pipework systems environment and in its behavior and obviously compliance against our requirements on the project and requirements of the systems that we are building. Over to Chris. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So what we had to try to do was obviously pull together a database which would allow a search engine to be optimized, and say a lot of work's gone into providing the guidance document. We've tried to approach this by making it as user-friendly as possible, hence the reason why developing it so it was app-based. And again, whilst the app-based approach provides a very sort of user-friendly tool, there's obviously a lot more technical information which is needed. So behind that, there is additional websites and support information to provide additional information to help support those who are either in the industry who need clarification, or basically to try and provide a structure so those who are new to the industry, they've got a tool which they can turn to provide some guidance on pipework and fitting systems. If I just talk about the background activity. So as Will said, this has been a cross-functional activity for the last sort of 2 years. The Pipework Working Group and BMTFA technical team have worked very closely to try and agree terminology and agree a sort of a coordinated approach. Within building services, there's always a lot of different views. A lot of people have various levels of experience. One of the in-jokes is you can sort of understand who a person is by how they talk about pipework systems in terms of their experience, their background, almost the sort of part of the country they come from. So there's lots of different ways of describing systems. However, what we've tried to do is get some agreement. So we have a defined set of applications that's been defined in terms of temperature ranges and pressure ranges, which has then allowed us to look at product suitability for those applications. So we developed a range of 22 generic building services applications. Alongside that, we've gone into the product standards, which cover the suitability of the carbon steel, stainless steel, and copper tubes for those applications. This is just a snapshot of the type of work which has been done, but we've looked at all the relevant standards and the legacy standards to try and build up a more detailed picture, technically, of which products are suitable for which particular applications. We've also then worked very closely with technical people who've understood sort of legacy standards, and that's allowed us then to make sure that as an industry we're capturing not only the right standards which people should be making reference to, but the old legacy standards which people still refer to. And as we've already mentioned, there is a legacy of us sort of cut and pasting from previous projects into new ones. So we've captured all that. So if somebody's searching or wanting to use the tool, we're trying to make sure that it's covered in terms of the materials, in terms of the correct technical specifications, the legacy specifications that may be referred to, but more importantly, the right sort of tube standards and grades, what we call the tube types, the technical delivery conditions. So all the things which actually influence how that product is going to be made, which also has a big knock-on effect how that product actually can behave in service. And again, what's become very important is making sure we clearly define the suitability at temperature and pressure. The other thing, as we've discussed, which provides a degree of complication, is all the different fitting options which are available. So again, what we've done is gone into the fitting standards. We work very closely with the fitting manufacturers who are members of BMTFA, but the information which they provided, we have taken back to the Pipework Working Group. So again, we're cross-referencing it with the installers, with people who basically use these systems, just to make sure that the right information is being collected to populate the app. And one of the things which became very noticeable was this difference between systems or fitting systems which employ mechanical means of couplings or ones which use elastomer seals or different types of seals, and how their suitability is at temperatures and under different pressure conditions. So in the background, all this work has been pulled together. Also, as members of technical committees and people who are very close to products or seeing the type of questions which get raised by the industry, what we've also tried to do is capture best practice guidance. So alongside the technical information which powers the app, we've also got some generic content which provides a lot more information and can be used as a resource to help assist in the decision-making process. So again, what I'll do is pass over to Matthew now, who's been key to developing the app, who's taken all this information which the Pipework Working Group and the Technical Committee at BMTFA have been coordinating over the last couple of years. And Matthew's been the person who's had to develop the sort of platform to allow all this knowledge to be used in an easy to use package. Matthew?
Hello, how are you all? So I've been working with Chris and the BMTFA and BESA over the course of the past 18 months to take all the work that's been done with the background information and try and get that into a structure that can be used as a single point of reference across multiple systems. So we're hoping that this data set can be used to provide information to the apps and also the supporting information on the BMTFA website. So the app is ready for launch. We're going through our final testing over the course of the next couple of weeks, and it'll be available on both Apple and Google platforms in the very near future. As we've said, it's an app that you download. There's no registration currently. The important aspect is to provide fast and easy access to an up-to-date data set. So as a simple overview, the application takes you through a set of questions and options that reduce the number of solutions that you'll be recommended or suggested at the end of it. We present the types of application that Chris has modelled, and you can click and read a little bit about those applications, about the temperature and pressure ranges that are intended for them. And we go through a step-by-step process where we are led through, once we've selected the application that we want, we show the sort of the agreed boundaries for both the temperature and pressure ranges. Once we can adjust those to put our own specific, my system is going to be operating at within these boundaries, which will then take you through another set of steps, which allows you to choose your intended pipe size, your tube category, and the tube material that you would prefer to use. And every time we take a step through the application screens, what we're doing is filtering down the many thousands of potential combinations down into a set of results that are applicable to just your selections. We present a summary of the application you chose, the temperature range, all your selections, and typically once you've answered the questions, you will get down to somewhere between 2 and 12 potential candidates for consideration in your systems. You can then, if you wish to, transfer to the BMTFA website, where there is a further information about standards, and you can research the other information that has been used to come up with these recommendations, and also download a PDF version of your search, so you can include that in your documentation packs. As I said, the website itself contains the background information and additional supporting information for the tubes at the moment. Fittings information is in progress, and that's all driven from the same data set that the app is driven from. So we have one single point of reference for this data. The intention is that everything is time stamped, and it shouldn't be possible to be to have out of date information. So, in summary, quick and easy selection of pipe and fitting options, easy access to the compatibility and guidance on a particular application, and access to the current specifications that should be in place. And then via the BMTFA website, also see who manufactures and distributes that information in the UK. I think that's the end of my slides.
Okay, I think you just did one of mine. So,
okay, sorry. I'll take that. There we go.
Yeah. So this is a summary then before the Q&A session, and it's a bit I call the Steve Jobs slot. Clearly the creative thinking and diligent work has concluded, so all that remains is for me to promote Pipe Plus app, but without access to Steve's charisma or indeed a black turtleneck shirt. However, what would Steve say about Pipe Plus app? A selection tool for metal tubes and fittings, a reference library assuring product compatibility and offering comprehensive application guidance, a standards database confirming current and legacy standards, a communicator giving access to manufacturing distributor information, a selection tool, a reference library, a standards database, a communicator, followed promptly by that signature statement, "Are you getting it?" before emphasizing this is one device and we are calling it Pipe Plus app. Seriously though, this is a wonderful initiative and a great example of industry collaboration. What we have is software that is both mobile device and desktop friendly, free to use and readily available for Android and Apple devices via app stores. It also links directly with enhanced information via the BESA and BEng TFA websites. Being open source software, its output is largely generic, so users must satisfy themselves that the guidance offered is appropriate to their unique circumstances. But manufacturers and distributors are well placed to confirm all selections prior to any procurement. We envisage great benefits from Pipe Plus app. We hope it helps demystify many aspects of pipework system selection, thereby reducing project risks. We hope anyone involved in pipework system selection embraces it, so it achieves its full potential of being a single source of reference that becomes the industry go-to standard. Leading to its launch, we are undertaking extensive validation testing to verify the app's functionality. We have an agreement in place for the go-live date, at which point BESA and BMTFA websites will have updates. Future planned work streams include a review and update of relevant BESA documents, specifically the TR20 series of specifications for pipework installation. Phase 2 of the app development is planned, and that will include thermal insulation options and further consider expansion to include plastic pipework systems, again with BESA working collaboratively with the relevant industry bodies and other interested parties. And finally, a review of CEBSE and other publications to identify any potential misalignments with our work. So that was me. Now back to Will Pitt for the Q&A session, with a final slide acknowledging the contributions made to Pipe Plus app from the various parties displayed.
Thank you very much, Douglas. Yeah, so that slide there was just an acknowledgement of all the many companies that have been involved in this project over the last 2 years, and it really has been a monumental effort to get to this point. The app, when you see it, may look relatively it's very user friendly, and it's quite sort of simplistic, really, but there has been a huge amount of work that has gone on behind the scenes to get it to this point. So we're now going to move on to the Q&A session. I've got a few questions that have come up on my screen in front of me, but before I do that, I've got a couple that I just wanted to sort of put out there more generally. I think the first question that comes to mind is around the legacy specifications and issues there. Do the panel feel that pipework specifications are regularly sort of cut and pasted, and what are potentially the implications of that happening? Chris, could I come to you first on that one, please?
Yes. So I regularly see people provide me with technical specifications which unfortunately are incorrect. And by incorrect, I mean they're normally making reference to legacy standards. So in terms of carbon steel tube, we do see BS 1387 as the go-to standard. Obviously, that was replaced about 14 years ago. So making reference to that standard leaves you wide open because standards have moved on. The replacement standard has tighter tolerances, has approval testing, but even that standard, the 10255, is still not sufficient enough to be able to clearly define what it is you need. So when we see legacy standards or incorrect standards being copied across from old projects into new projects, it really does mean that the person is being left exposed to compliance issues, traceability issues, supply issues. And recently we've seen the standards change. The way we promote our products into the market is to try and multi-certify. So we make reference to more than one type of standard to clearly show whether it's suitable under things like the Construction Products Regulation or the Pressure Equipment Directive. We know that a typical building services carbon steel tube can be supplied in either seamless, hot finish, cold form, and cold form tubes now are no longer covered under the Pressure Equipment Directive. So if somebody's got an installation and they're using legacy standards, the standards have moved on. The new 10217 Part 1 standard has been updated. It was updated in 2019. It became live the 20th of April this year, which technically means that those cold form tubes are no longer covered under the PED. It also means that technically they can't be used for temperatures greater than 50 degrees C. So if you're using old legacy standards, you're not capturing the fact that the standards have moved on. Therefore, you might be installing something which is no longer technically correct.
Right, so I can see now why this is going to be so useful to so many people across the industry. I think that it kind of links into the whole knowledge gap and the skill shortage and all those kind of things there, really. In fact, on that subject there, what do you think are the implications of the skill shortage with regard to pipework systems generally? Actually, I'll go back to Chris on this one, and then I'll go to the others as well. Chris.
No, I think it's a big problem. I think historically, because everybody's used to making what I'll call a standard building services product, you've sort of relied on a lot of expertise or people who've been in the industry for many years to actually know what they're doing and to do it properly. But what we've certainly seen over the last couple of years is we've seen a whole lot of new innovations come to the market in terms of carbon steel tube. You see press fit thin wall systems, but we've also seen a lot more different materials being used, a lot more plastics, stainless, copper systems, also press fit systems. So there's a much more complex example of pipework components. And what we've obviously seen is people leave the industry. It's been difficult to attract new people to this industry. Building services is something which is, it's around us everywhere we go, but it's not something which students and next generation of engineers sort of are told about. So we do know that there is a bit of an issue with trying to attract people to this industry. We've seen over the years, a lot of people have left the industry, and there's this gap in the middle, this knowledge gap. If you start talking to end users and start talking to distributors, they recognise that as well. And it was one of the reasons why the MTFA wanted to work so closely with BESA to sort of say, look, this is something which we acknowledge right through the whole supply chain. What can we do to try and help make it easier for people to understand that standards have changed, technology has changed, and it was becoming more and more obvious that information is out there in the public domain, but in some cases it's very conflicting information. So to help understand what people need to put in place in terms of training, to help make sure that people have the right education or the right understanding of some of these systems, then these types of initiatives, these types of collaborations, I think are going to be part of the solution. But I think there's a much bigger issue out there in building services, which I think most people on this call will acknowledge. We need to attract the right people into the industry, and we need to make sure they have a training plan, which means that they are aware of all the different systems and the new technologies which are coming into this market.
And Douglas, potentially, I think it would be good if I could get the view from a consulting engineer on your view on the implications of the skill shortage with regard to pipework systems. Have you got any pertinent points?
I'd go back to Chris's earlier point though about trying to keep standards up to date. We try to do it once every 2 or 3 years, and it is just such a task to do. So, for example, there are lots of new products coming on the market which we have to keep pace with, but then there's also the existing information we have in our specifications. To give you an example, we quote something like 2040 references to British standard documents, so that's excluding any other industry standard. And whilst you can get BSI to let you know when those updates occur, you still almost need to have your own database in-house to manage that information. And then, of course, what you then have to do is look at each one of those standards, at least read the introduction part of it. And as Chris hinted, sometimes you have to go in those standards and make various choices or classes have to be picked. And there used to be the information to be provided by the tender section in those BS documents. But again, unless you know that, all you're really doing is just quoting standards with a little bit of ignorance thrown in because you haven't really looked at them. So there is that task of, and it is a huge task trying to keep it up to date. But to answer your question, it is possibly to do with, I don't say ignorance and inexperience cascading down through the generations, but a lot of people in the old days used to be pipework fitters or work their way up in the industry through the tools and would be far more in tune with pipework fittings. And also some of the modern engineers perhaps haven't had that exposure, so they're training the next generation of engineers who again have those voids in their knowledge.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and I think most people would agree with what you're saying. So I think from a consulting engineer's perspective, I hope this app and this project will be well received. Irek, if I could turn to you, obviously this pipework, this project is about selection and specification of pipework, but there's a whole load of sort of supplementary guidance that may feed into this. Will the pipework app, will it signpost users to other relevant technical guidance?
And the idea is that basically we need to keep this app updated, and the data behind needs to be reviewed, very often, to be honest, take into consideration how often not only the standards, the industry standards are changing, but how often and different kind of pipework and joining systems are implemented. So really this is not maybe monthly, but really very often we need to consider looking into this database that we are holding and make sure that basically everything is up to date. So I think so there's really a huge task on people involved in this, and task that pipework, working group should really stay alive and keep this, apps up to all the specification up to date, basically as often as we can.
I think on that same subject, Irek, there is a project which is nearing completion, which will kind of supplement this, which is around providing some additional guidance on pipework protection for corrosion, and that will sort of feed into the pipework selection app. So the BESA Pipework working group will continue to collaborate with BMTFA. In fact, we are collaborating also with other associated trade associations as well to provide this kind of industry guidance, because I think it is very much needed. I'm going to turn back to Chris actually, because this is kind of a similar question around specification. The question is around the BESA TR20 suite of specifications. What's happening with them essentially?
Well, again, we've seen this where we've been trying to sort of clarify specifications which should be used on projects, and people have made reference to the BESA documentation TR20, and the problem is that actually is currently out of date and it's in need of reviewing. So there is now a work stream to basically go through that with BMTFA manufacturing members, who can basically then put forward what they believe is the right relevant standards and technical information to support that document. And then the plan is that document comes back to the pipework working group at BESA, where it can be reviewed, and we can make sure then that guidance is kept in line with what information is on the app and the website. And more importantly, that it is updated on a more regular basis. So we know now that there's a lot of work being done with standards. We know as a result of Grenfell, a lot of the manufacturers are keen to make sure that their standards, their products, and their technical messages are correctly aligned. And where there is some confusion, or people are basically saying, well, we understand what you're saying as a manufacturer, and we've got this app and it's pointing us back to you for more information, but ideally we would like to have something which is perhaps maybe not driven by the manufacturers. And this is where we think that the BESA and the TR documents, and that's not just TR20, it's TR50, and it's all the other work which is being done around pipework systems. That's where we see these documents as really being the go-to Bible for the industry to make reference to, and then they can make their informed decisions technically, and then that's basically going to help secure the supply chain. It's going to make sure that those guidance documents are helping with the decisions at design level, and then hopefully they'll get locked into the specification into the project, and then that way you know that what's being installed and being commissioned is actually what the designers originally intended, and it's in line with the latest guidance documentation, such as the BESA TR20, which hopefully will also then be supported and endorsed by CEBSE and allow further alignment through the supply chain.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive answer. I'm going to, the question that's just come in actually is, has the app, or will the app be extended to consider plastic pipe work? Now, I know how much work has gone into it to get it to the app to where it is now, so that's probably the next project really. But is anybody on the panel that would want to come in and sort of give a commentary on plastic pipework systems? I mean, Doug, if I throw you into the hot seat on that one?
I get the impression with plastic pipework systems, although the tube itself can be quite standard, the actual fittings that you have with it, a lot of the designs are proprietary products of an individual manufacturer. So I think by default it's quite difficult to have those fittings complying with national standards. But I think the complexity was enough with metal pipework systems, so I imagine it's going to be even more complex trying to match the various combinations of fittings with the plastic pipework options. But I think the industry is moving in that direction. Rightly or wrongly, there is thoughts that plastic is the future.
Irek, have you got any thoughts on plastic and whether it's something that we should be considering?
Yeah, I mean, especially, we can see the trend that more and more plastic type tubes and fittings are specifying for different kind of systems. And when maybe 5-6 years ago we've seen only appear them on domestic or underfloor heatings, now we see them everywhere specified for the LTHW, chill water, gas, and other services. So it's something that really we need to look into quickly to get the guidance in place and give our engineers some assurance that they are selecting the right product, especially at the moment there is so many systems available and so similar systems available with completely different properties and performance. So we really need to look into it as soon as possible, basically, to avoid any risk. Basically, as I mentioned, is on the market is so many different systems, and it's difficult really to differ which one is really compliant.
Okay. Now, another question that's just that's come in that I think is very topical at the moment, given where we are with COP26. Has there been any consideration to giving, or any consideration given to the calculating of embodied carbon in pipework systems? There's a question. Chris, embodied carbon. Any thoughts?
Lots of thoughts. Obviously, as a Tata Steel, as a steel producer, obviously we have a very environmentally we've got some challenges ahead of us, and we do have various decarb strategies which are being developed, and we know going forward that that it's going to be a key selling feature of any product. So we have started to try and implement ways of capturing. We already have EPD statements, environmental product declarations for our products. We already calculate just how much carbon we actually incur during our manufacturing processes and what's associated with those products. So it is happening, and I see conversations also being had with other manufacturers who realise now that going forward that it's going to be a key selling point, a key characteristic of their products to make sure that they are seen as being as carbon neutral as possible, or there's offset strategies in place. It is going to be one of the most talked about discussion points, I think, over the next sort of 2 or 3 years, because it's very obvious now that as an industry, it's becoming more and more apparent that a green credential is going to be required to be able to operate and sell products into this market.
And Douglas, as a consultant, are you seeing clients starting to request this kind of information is provided in terms of embodied carbon?
It's certainly happening with a lot of building materials. I think pipework systems might be one of the last ones people tend to think of. And what the industry needs, I think, is a unified method of actually calculating that, because everyone might calculate it in a different format. So clearly we probably know roughly what the embodied carbon is per cubic meter of certain materials, but then transferring that into the volume in a pipework system might be quite difficult. I mean, it should be fairly simple enough, but I think what we need is just a unified way of doing it, so everybody recognises and can compare different values. And I'm sure, as Chris might say, if you can use steel products with a higher tensile strength, then presumably you can reduce the amount of wall thickness you need and make carbon savings that way.
Right. Okay.
I was going to say that's one of the initiatives we're looking at, not just in terms of pipe work for building services, obviously we can go to higher grades and thinner walls, which basically means less material and weight savings. But our structural engineering team are also doing something similar. It's looking at using higher grades of steel to allow you to have less steel in a building, and by association, it's reducing those values. It's also about designing smartly as well. You know, we know that there's a legacy of perhaps maybe over engineering and using the wrong size of products. So in building services, you know, pipe sizing and being able to optimize systems accordingly is all going to play a big part in reducing the overall carbon footprint.
Okay, I've got one last question that I'm going to throw out there, and then we'll look to wrap up. So, how will the increasing move towards off-site fabrication impact on the traditional choices of material and fabrication techniques for pipework systems? Interesting question. I think I'm going to go back to Chris and then Irek. Chris.
I think we've been moving more towards a modular approach for some years now, and I think with pipework systems, the pipework themselves will be built into modules quite easily. What will be changing is your jointing technologies. We'll see people move towards more flexible jointing systems to be able to take those modular units and bolt them together, moving away from perhaps maybe some of the old legacy ways of jointing. People will be looking at sort of speed of work and faster, more convenient jointing technologies, I feel. But again, back to weight, being able to move to thinner walls, lighter weight products, to those modules are easier to manhandle and easier to get onto site and install. I think it's a way to go. One of the other advantages which the modular approach or the off-site approach brings is it means you're manufacturing in a controlled environment where quality procedures are more easily to be applied. And more importantly, the supply chain is more secure. Obviously, you're able to look at material being purchased and procured in such a way that traceability can be guaranteed. Whereas what we see at the moment on open sites is perhaps material may get accidentally mixed, or with subcontracting, other people might be bringing different material in which may not be in accordance with the specification you wanted, or there may be other issues in terms of traceability which might get overlooked. And we think going forward with digital data and new ways of working in terms of traceability, I think more and more people will look at off-site fabrication to try and basically maximise the benefits it brings.
Thank you, Chris. I mean, Irek, Laing O'Rourke are well known as leaders in off-site manufacturing, particularly in the M&E sector. Have you got any thoughts around the impact of this on pipework selection and materials?
I mean, in my opinion, type of material, tubes will not really influence, modular building, because we see that modularization is something that we pay really high attention to, and regardless of the materials used, we carry on with the modules on projects anyway. Basically, obviously, it's all influenced about making lighter and more easier to handle around and position. But at the end of the day, basically, whatever the consultant or designer specify, we need to make sure that we are manufacture and safely move around the site and safely install. So I would say that directly that the type of material will not influence the modularization or make any material preferable. It's all about how we manage and handle the modules or materials, and basically even the heaviest modules could be handled very safely. So this is my opinion.
Good, thank you very much. Okay, well, I think at that point it probably just remains for me to say thank you very much to all of you for your contributions today, but also for your huge contributions to get this project where it is now. The pipework selection app is going through final testing at the moment, and it will be released to industry within the next month or so, I hope. So please look out for that. It is a game changer for the industry, and I think it's something that will be very, very welcomed. So I think I'm going to draw this session to a close now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on this today, and I hope you've enjoyed this session and the rest of the conference. But otherwise, I'll say goodbye and good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.